to talk about smoking. Tobacco has been around for over 2,000 years. People were smoking and chewing tobacco during cultural and religious ceremonies back then. Even Christopher Columbus was a smoker, as he was the first European to discover it. Then, in the 1600s, tobacco had spread all the way to England and Europe, and eventually used for trade. Tobacco is naturally occurring, mostly in North America, in Ontario. That means it started here in the green, and then traveled all the way across the ocean in the 1600s. That's pretty impressive. Tobacco is what's considered a stimulant. So according to dictionary.com, a stimulant is something that quickens a vital process or the functional activity of an organ or a part. Stimulants target your adrenal glands, which give off adrenaline and dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, which means it sends information from one part of the body to another. It also plays a big role in how we feel pleasure. It helps us strive, focus, and help us find things interesting. Adrenaline is the body's natural fight or flight response hormone, but too much of it can be detrimental to your health. With all of these hormones being released, your body's pretty quick to act, and your heart rate and your breathing both increase as well. Now we know from what I mentioned earlier that it can be chewed and it can be smoked, but did you know that tobacco could be sniffed? Here are some of the street names for each of the way that we administer tobacco. So for smoking, we have darts, cigs, regular old smokes, and then in England they call them fags. For chewable tobacco, it's chew, chaw, or dip. Dip is interchangeable between chewable and sniffable. And then for sniffable, there's dip, snuff, and rub. Now we've discussed how tobacco gets into our systems, but how is it eliminated? It comes out through our urine, our blood, our saliva, our hair, and our fingernails. And doctors test this to see how much nicotine is in our system when prescribing us anything to help us quit. Now you take one drag off a cigarette and you feel those effects in like 10 seconds. These effects are alertness and feeling pleasant, but these effects only last a few minutes. But when you smoke too much, then you can feel dizzy, queasy, your breathing is heavy and fast, and you can get a headache. But extreme overdose, your heart rate decreases, you're likely to have diarrhea, your muscles, you can't really control them, your reflexes are low and weak, and it's possible you could have a seizure. For people who are physically dependent on cigarettes, it's a routine kind of thing. So you wake up in that first thing in the morning and you want a cigarette within the first few minutes of waking up. And that first cigarette is the most important thing. And with routines, right? So you wake up, you have a smoke, you eat dinner, you have a smoke, things like that. But for physiological dependence, it's a little different. People who are physiologically dependent, their body is searching for that dopamine and adrenaline release. They want to feel that alertness and that pleasure. So they're gonna smoke more to get that feeling. Withdrawal from nicotine can be pretty tricky as you're feeling a lot of things while you're going through that. You can't really focus, your appetite's increased a little bit, you're having trouble sleeping, and you're irritable. Plus the cravings you're experiencing during this time are very intense. The dangers of smoking. Smoking is the leading cause of preventable death in Canada, which means if people didn't smoke, they wouldn't die. Easy as that. But it also causes lung cancer and throat cancer as well. Plus, if you're pregnant, you're more likely to have a miscarriage, stillborn, or a premature birth, or your baby could be born underweight, or it could live with learning or developmental or behavioral difficulties in their lifetime. Now we're just going to take a few minutes to watch this informative video on the dangers of smoking. Yes, some of this information has been covered, but it's... Are you kidding me? Sorry about that. What is that?
Smoking-related disease. In fact, all of these things are negatively affected by smoking. Pretty much every organ in your body.
We're just going to restart that. Apologize for the technical difficulties.
Did you know that smokers are twice as likely to have a heart attack? And that 1 in 2 smokers will die from a smoking-related disease? In fact, all of these things are negatively affected by smoking. Pretty much every organ in your body. We all know that smoking is bad, but do you know why? That's what we're going to discover in this video. When you pass someone smoking, does it make you cough or your chest feel tight? Perhaps you thought it was the smell? It's actually because you're inhaling dangerous substances into your body. Nicotine is a toxin that stimulates your body to produce adrenaline. This increases your heart rate and raises your blood pressure, thus making your heart work harder. It is also addictive, which is why it's very difficult for smokers to quit. Tar contains over 1,000 chemicals. It forms a tacky brown or yellow residue, which is why sometimes smokers have stained teeth. And if you could see them, stained lungs too. Some of the chemicals in tar are carcinogens, so they cause cancer, making lung, mouth, and throat cancers more common in smokers. The last culprit you need to know about is carbon monoxide. It is an odorless, colourless, and extremely poisonous gas. The carbon monoxide permanently binds to the hemoglobin in your blood, blocking oxygen from binding. So oxygen can't be transported around the body and used for respiration, causing shortness of breath and fatigue. Your heart once more has to beat even faster to supply the body with the oxygen that it needs. Let's now look at some diseases caused by smoking. Emphysema is when the tiny structures in your lungs called alveoli break down. As alveoli are responsible for gas exchange, this is not good news. The inhaled smoke causes the walls of the alveoli to weaken and decrease in surface area, making gas exchange less efficient. Unsurprisingly, breathing becomes much harder and smokers are much more at risk of coughs and chest infections. Smoking also causes the cilia in the lungs to become irritated and produce excess mucus. So that's the lungs, and we saw earlier that nicotine and carbon monoxide make the heart work much harder. Now the blood vessels. Smoking is a major risk factor for a disease called atherosclerosis. This is when a waxy substance known as plaque builds up in the arteries, making them narrower and harder for the blood to get through. This then reduces blood flow to all parts of the body. It can affect any artery in the body and will result in different diseases developing. Plaque building up in the coronary arteries, so the ones that transport oxygen-rich blood around the heart, can over time cause a blood clot to form, which cuts off some of the heart muscle and causes it to die. This is the most common cause of heart attacks. To learn more about heart disease, watch this video. So we've seen that smoking increases your risk of heart, lung, kidney disease, strokes and cancers. Smoking can also make your bones more brittle and so more likely to break. And it also can greatly reduce fertility in both men and women. While smoking is harmful for everyone, it is extremely bad to smoke when pregnant. It can lead to miscarriage, premature birth and other consequences. So, now you know some of the harmful effects smoking has on your body and why we're told not to do it. But the good news? Once you stop smoking, your health improves and your body will begin to recover. It's never too late to give up.
If you liked the video, give it a thumb.
There are several treatments for people who are smokers. There are behavior therapies, so that the routine for the physical dependence that I was mentioning earlier, they would get you to do something else when you first wake up, or they would get you to do something else after you eat a meal to try to change your way of being. There's also nicotine replacement therapies, which would be like what we see with Nicorette. They've got the patch, the gum, the spray, the puffer. There's things like that that all give them nicotine, and it replaces the cigarettes, which have more harmful chemicals in them. And then other medications that I was mentioning earlier that your doctor would prescribe to you. Starting smoking is easy, quitting is hard. Is it really worth it? And here are my references. Thanks for watching.